and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they only last a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on the good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. This is God's word to us this morning. I think most of us feel a bit off. You could tell that from the beginning of the service. I certainly feel a bit off in these days in which we find ourselves. We're anxious about this continuing COVID-19. We're feeling a bit stir-crazy, a bit isolated. We are weary. We are weary of it all. And now we are grieving in the face of losing Ruth. And if you are anything like me, joy or joyfulness just isn't a word that comes to the tip of your tongue or is lodged in your brain during these days. Heaven knows we could use a lot or even a little joy. And our lectionary passages for this morning have joy in abundance. Our texts are filled with joy. Isaiah describes a God who pours rain and snow down from heaven without measure, watering everything on earth in full confidence that what needs to grow will indeed grow. And because of that, you and I will go out with joy, and the mountains and the hills will burst into song, and even the trees and the fields will clap their hands. The psalmist writes, "The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy, and the meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain, and together they shout with joy." Paul, if we would have read the Romans passage this morning, insists on the joy that we have for the free gift that we have been given of salvation, saying, "He who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies, also through his Spirit that dwells in you." Joyful abundance. And our gospel text for this morning, with its extravagance, with this sower sowing seeds with joyful abandon. I'm always reminded of a story of one of my girls' favorite children's books when I read this passage, Miss Rumphius. Does anybody know it? It's a great book. It's written by Barbara Cooney, a famous children's author. As far as I know, she's no relation to my husband. But it's based on the story, a true story of a woman who, in her retirement, remembered something that her grandfather had told her after she said she wanted to live an exciting and full life. He told her, "You must do something else. You must do something to make the world a more beautiful place." She set out to do this in her retirement by flinging seeds with abandon all across the Maine coast. She indeed made the world a more beautiful place. As you can see by these couple of slides, this is literally what the Maine coast looks like in early June, as the earth just comes alive in riots of color with lupins. Abundant, extravagant, joyful abandonment of flinging seeds. In our gospel lesson for this morning, we are told Jesus went out of the house, and now sitting in a boat near the shore, looking at the vast crowds that have gathered to listen to him, he tells them a parable. A sower went out to sow. And as he sows, some seeds fall in the path, and the birds come and quickly eat those up. And others fall on the rocky ground where they spring up quickly, but then wither when the sun burns them because they have shallow roots. And other seeds fall on the thorns, and they are choked. And still other seeds fall on good soil, and they bring forth abundant grain. The parable of the sower. This parable was acted out in the play Godspell, which, if you remember, is based on the Gospel of Matthew. If you didn't, then that's your little factoid for the day. In this musical, 4 actors dressed like clowns play each of the seeds, each of them meeting the fate that was told in the parable. The seed cast on the hard dirt path had no sooner hit the ground than pecking crows swooped down onto the stage, and that seed met its fate, and off he goes. The seed thrown onto the rocky ground came to life, waving her arms, dancing around, but then a sun appeared above, and soon the seed clown grew limp and crumpled onto the stage. 2 down, 2 to go. The seed thrown among the thorns barely had time to get to his knees before he was surrounded by prickly-looking creatures intent on choking that poor seed. Seed made a lot of noise before he finally exited the stage right. And then there was the last seed. This seed cast on good soil. And she came up gracefully to life and danced around the stage, receiving a round of applause before the curtain came down on that particular scene in the play Godspell. And the parable can be read like this, focused exclusively on the 4 types of soil that Jesus describes. But then, we can feel bad about our faith life. I mean, the odds aren't so good. We got a 25% chance. We got a 1 out of 4 chance of being good soil. I don't know about you, but I don't play the lottery because I am not a lucky person. We then can begin to think, how do I make myself into better soil? We feel judged, and we can feel inadequate. We can feel anxious. We begin to wonder how to make our spiritual soil less rocky or less thorny or less hard. We design all kinds of self-improvement projects to fix what's wrong with us. More prayer, less Twitter, less Facebook, less games, whatever it may be. More Bible study. Oh, let's be less cynical. Let's have more church when we could actually really have church. Less television. In other words, we begin to think, how do I clean up my act to get into that 4th category? We read the parable as an indictment of our relationship with a sower who just can't seem to find a hospitable environment within each of our souls. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with planning and pruning. There's nothing wrong with honest and humble reflection of our spiritual lives. We all need that. We need to do this on our journey as Christians. But I think we might miss something crucial in this gospel text when we read it as the parable of the soils, because that's not what it says. It says the parable of the sower. It's a parable about the nature and the character of God, about God's kingdom, God's provision and God's extravagant generosity when it comes to us. This is about God's joy. Look again at the actions of the sower. He flings seeds and they fall everywhere. Imagine it. Imagine Miss Rumphy is here. She's a sower, blissfully walking along the rocky Maine coast and fields and meadows and back alleys, wherever, the sidewalks, the playgrounds, the parking lots of the world. Fistfuls of seeds, open hands. There is no way to contain that much seed. There's no way to sort it, no way to save it. Of course, it will spill over. Of course, it will fall through the fingers and cover the ground. Of course, it will scatter in every direction. But here's the surprising part of the story. That sower doesn't care. They don't mind at all that the seed is spilling from their hands. There's a sense that what needs to flourish will flourish. Maybe not all at once, maybe not everywhere, but that's okay too. In other words, the sower in Jesus' parable is really unconcerned about where that seed falls or lands or settles. All he chooses to do is to keep sowing, keep flinging, keep open hands. Why? Because there's more than enough to go around. There's enough seed to accomplish everything that sower wants to accomplish. There's enough seed to waste, to fling joyfully at all kinds of soil. As different as each of those soils are, they hold two things in common: seeds and the sower. The sower sows the same seeds in all four soils, with equal toil, with equal hope, and with equal generosity. The sower does not evaluate the quality or the potential of the soil. No ground is declared undeserving of those seeds. This is not about the quality of our dirt. It's about the quality of God, the divine sower. It's you and I who want to judge what kind of dirt we are or others are. And God simply wants to sow his life into ours. Whether we are rocky and parched, whether we are thorny and prickly, whether we are one step behind or two steps ahead, or whether we, at certain times in our life, actually are good and fertile soil, enriched with that great fertilizer, and we are ready to sprout. This doesn't seem to matter to the sower. Our divine sower wants to sow his life into ours with the seeds of God. And no life, no person, no soil is left unsown. Seeds here, seeds there, seeds everywhere. Seems like poor planning to you and I. It's just wasteful. Doesn't really work with our economics. It's not good farming practices, right, David? Especially with the costs of seeds and the time spent sowing. These are not the sower's concerns, though. They are our concerns. Thankfully, this parable is about God's faithfulness and not about farming or quality or how things work in this world. In the sower's world, wastefulness gives way to hope, inefficiency gives way to love, and profitability gives way to generosity. it gives way to joy. In this time of sickness and scarcity and anxiousness and suffering and loss, what does the world need more now than a lavish sower, and to be reminded that that's exactly what we have? So, my dear friends, believe the abundant and joyful news that every part of your life has been sown with the seeds of God. Look at him, our lavish sower, tossing seeds to the wind with a daring and delighted smile on his face, inviting us to toss seeds to others in abundant joy. The question is, will we?